me personally on the religious side was a lot of that Catholic guilt. Like, why do I feel this way? Why am I getting excited? Why am I starting to notice girls in a certain way? Why am I trying to have to put a coat over my pants and all these type of things?
Front tying your sweatshirts
yes,
around with
definitely.
Laced around in the back.
Without a doubt. Just wanted to welcome everybody to second episode of Lionz Den.
Episode 2.
Finished with some success on the last one. Everybody might notice we're a little brighter. We did have that last time, but kind of forgot to turn it on.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
Little technical difficulties. Again, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. You could also email us at lionsden146@gmail.com. Hopefully here's some of your comments. We do want to be crystal clear. This is all about positivity. Any nonsense in the comments, we're just going to block you, delete. Have no problem with having a solid conversation. Don't have to agree with anything we're saying or everything we're saying for that matter, but keep it positive, keep it upbeat. It's not the place to negative energy in it. Just want to keep it real, something productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, positive, productive, open.
So today we kind of want to go over what the difference is between religion, faith, spirituality. You'll hear us talk about different things in different ways. It's kind of important because we're not using Webster's dictionary. It's kind of like our own definition of how we see it. I can kind of start off with each subject. So religion is pretty straightforward. Organized religion. Me personally, I'm Catholic. I know you consider yourself Christian, right?
Yep.
Kind of non-denominational.
Yep.
Catholic.
Yep, absolutely.
For you?
So I'm pretty much Baptist. I grew up Baptist.
Yeah.
I did go to a Catholic church for a little bit, but apostolic is probably where I fall in. But I mean, I'm Christian.
Gotcha. Yeah, so we definitely have the organized religion background in all of us. So that's what I would define as religion, would be an organized religion. Christianity, Buddhism, Muslim, Judaism, Buddha, you name it. All those would be organized religion. Faith, I would consider, faith is having belief in a higher purpose, a bigger being, something that's kind of geared towards that supreme being, God, Allah, whatever you want to call it. So when we're talking about faith, you're kind of gearing towards that end result is that higher power, God. Spirituality is kind of newer thing. And I guess it's not that much newer, but spirituality could be yoga, could be hiking in the woods, be kayaking, canoeing, surfing, something
on the bike.
Yeah, being for sure. For all of us, being out on our motorcycles could definitely be a spiritual experience. Hiking, camping.
Yeah, it's something that speaks to you, that brings you to that that inner peace that is somehow connected with faith, because spirituality to me is connected with faith, and then later on can be connected to religion. But it's that thing that you do that speaks to you, whatever it is, internally. It can be external as well, but usually it's that internal feeling that goes along with something positive that you're doing.
Yeah, so again, I just think it's kind of important to talk about each one because different people are in different phases in their life. Some people are very spiritual and, might not even believe in God for that matter, but still have a spiritual awareness to them, a higher evolution, kind of higher frequency. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. We're not here to take anything away from anybody.
Yeah, I don't really think there's one right answer in any of it. As long as you kind of,
But you don't think we should start wars over difference of opinion?
That's never happened. Whoa. Over God? Jesus, never.
It's good to know.
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter how you find it. It's picking a path, and they're not exclusive. You could be spiritual, have faith, and still believe in a specific religion. You could be spiritual without believing in a religion. My opinion, they're all tied. They're all connected. Mm-hmm. But, the old saying of there's a million ways to skin a cat, it's not really it's not really which one you pick. It's as long as you're focused on what you're tuned into. I think to some degree, everybody has a level of either spirituality, faith, or religion in some way, shape, or form, whether you know it or not. I think we all experience that. And I think if you hone in on one, they eventually lead to another too,
Yeah, and I think they definitely can. And that's kind of why, thought it would be good for us to talk about it today, because depending on where you're at in your journey and where you're at, either spiritually, faith, religion, what have you, you hear a lot of different things about it. So This is good, that's bad, this is the right way, that's the wrong way. And I mean, the whole point of Lionz Den is finding that higher power by, whatever means that it takes. And then I do think everything is evolutionary. So we're always constantly growing, we're constantly leveling up, constantly evolving. Especially for me, I've kind of been through all phases of those and different points in my life, and then been back around. I was raised in a Catholic home. Wasn't anything strict, but we went to church, Easter, Christmas, any of the big occasions, and, sporadically here and there. And then there's been points in time where like my mom was trying to be more involved. So we might go a little bit more at that point in time. But I know we talked like in the past conversations that you kind of get to that point where, you're getting a little more mature, and I think we call it puberty.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be called.
So, and your hormones are going a little crazy, and that's when things get kind of trippy. As far as me personally, on the religious side, was a lot of that Catholic guilt. Like, why do I feel this way? Why am I getting excited? Why am I starting to notice girls in a certain way? Why am I trying to have to put a coat over my pants and
Were you
all these type of things?
Front tying your sweatshirts
Yes,
around with
definitely.
laced around in the back?
Without a doubt. And, a lot of guilt with that, and always having that, idea in my head, like, hey, God, could you turn your head because I got or turn the volume off on my brain because I got some things going through.
Yeah, no, I relate to that too. Like going through puberty, and at a time is when I lived across the street from the Catholic Church, and I would go there and do a lot of events there. And obviously there were, young women that I was attracted to, and I would have like these discussions with myself and with God, like, hey, I didn't come here for this. Why is this happening to me here? And it's just hormones and puberty. But at the time, I wanted an understanding of why, I had to sit at the table longer than everybody else and think about odd things, like think about movies.
Right.
But I went through that same thing, so I can relate to that.
I think all of us went through it. But what's weird is you're going through that, and then it almost like for me, because I discovered these different channels of my path, and it was kind of one of those telltale signs of like, well, I feel this way, but now I'm being kind of told this is wrong. This just doesn't seem right. So it was almost like that first little look into, for me, like, this just doesn't add up. Mm-hmm. So, maybe I find something that does add up. You kind of touched on it. You grew up, Catholic, and I know you've obviously in your book you talk about all the different, religions you've studied. For me, religion was never forced. It was just kind of, something that was there. If I was with a relative, we would go, and I never really understood it. We stand, we kneel, what's going on, Right. None of it ever made sense. So I was always kind of left to figure it out for myself, but I understood the basics. I understood the Catholic side was more guilt-driven, which is why during that time in life, you're like, this just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I kind of eventually found my path where God is not so much vengeful as a loving God. But it was almost like that first point for me of where you start to question like how I want to, what my take is on religion.
Yeah, I think from the very get, the first thing you're taught right? When you're in Catholic school, religious education is you learn the story of Adam and Eve, right? So I always struggled with the same exact thing, right? And growing up Catholic and you know, still considering myself a Catholic, it was very, very guilt driven, you know, and that was always contradicted for me, because if we were created, you know, in God's image and we were created by God, why'd you make us imperfect? So why was us even eating an apple an option? Well, it's because you're supposed to fail, you know, and that didn't click for me for a long time, you know, and I kind of shifted from more of a religion-based to more of a faith-based for a very long time, because I struggled with that concept. And as I kind of got further into it, I realized that, well, instead of looking at it as why aren't we perfect, why did we even have that temptation from the get-go, is because we weren't meant to be perfect. Because one, you hear perfect is boring, but you learn nothing when you have perfection. And I think that we were set to be able to fail so we could continue to grow and develop as human beings to continue to become better overall. And as I started understanding that more, and you know, that's obviously just my outlook on it. But as I started to go more down that path, it really made it easier for me in life to be able to make mistakes and be okay with it. Not just for the cliche reason of I'm learning for it, but because it kind of felt like a purpose for me. You know, it kind of felt like I'm meant to go through this struggle so I can come out the other side smarter, wiser, stronger, you know, and that's what really made me latch onto it. That's what I took from it, not what everybody was telling me, that, you know, you have impure thoughts, you do things that you're not supposed to do, you're going to HE double hockey sticks, you know, and I never really latched onto that aspect of it. I really latched on to that first message is a message of learning. It's a teaching lesson, you know, and when I honed in on that, it helped me out quite a bit.
Well, and that's definitely why I wanted to talk about it, because I think for a lot of people, that's kind of where you kind of run up against the wall with religion, you know, because you're feeling certain things that are completely natural. You're told that you shouldn't be feeling them, or kind of where to gear towards it. And so you're just kind of left in a state of confusion. And I know Daryl's a big fan too, and we talked about this. For me, hearing Prince, being such a huge Prince fan, and hearing him constantly talk about God, hearing him in concert praying, and, you know, obviously he was very sexual. Kids, please don't listen to Darling Nikki.
Listen to Prince.
Every kid is listening to that song.
Yeah, sorry.
Now.
Prince Estate, please forward your royalties over this way. But it was like a revelation for me that here's somebody who is obviously has a strong belief in God, has a strong faith in God, but is kind of feeling the things that I'm feeling, talking about in his music, talking about it in his concerts. And that's, again, for Lionz Den, that's the whole point, is that thing to identify with, where you're not feeling so ostracized. Because I think a lot of times what happens, so had I not had that connection with Prince, I don't know if my journey with religion would have stayed the same. Because I kind of started getting to a point where I want to live two separate lives. I had the things that I was feeling, and there was the things that didn't want God to know. And God is always present, so you really can't turn it on and off. But even going to church, as Daryl said, you know, and as your famous kneel and standing, and you're noticing the girl's butt in front of you, and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not here. And you leave feeling even shittier than you came in, and you're just like, you feel like a horrible person. And I think when you experience that repeatedly, you start going a little less, you start reading a little less of the Bible, you start, you know, getting a little less involved. I mean, it's impactful.
Yeah, and I mean, while we're on that, you know, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what we look at as far as communication, you know, when we're praying. And so when you're in the church and you're seeing that and you're having that, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do it, I slipped. And then again, when you see Prince on stage and you see him talking about these things, and then you also see him praying on stage and taking the time to recognize his faith, recognize God. you kind of look at it as, man, I shouldn't be doing that. And, you know, you don't realize that something as little as going to a Prince concert, and not that that's little in any means, but going to a Prince concert and you seeing something like that, your answer is right in front of you.
For
Right.
sure.
So, God, why is it that I go to a place of worship, your house, I'm at the church, and I'm having impure thoughts? Well, you're giving your answer. You know, you may have been given your answer 5 years, 10 years later, but you see somebody that you idolize that has a very concrete, or what we perceive as a very concrete faith, religion with God, able to talk about it publicly on stage in front of hundreds of fans, thousands of fans. There's your answer, right? There's your validity. There's your, it's okay. You know, that's what you were looking for, that reinforcement. And it's funny how us as people, you probably looked at it that moment as, well, why is it all right for him to do it? You know?
Well, what was funny about it is the prayer was literally, he was on the piano, and so he starts praying. He has a song actually named God. And he's kind of praying within the song, but God, they love me when I'm nasty. And he's kind of going through the stuff that you're thinking.
Yeah.
And kind of talking it through in his prayer. And, you know, end was, okay, I'll try to be good. But it was just funny to hear him, because he wasn't wrong. I mean, at that time, he was the biggest thing on earth. I mean, I was a young guy, and I was having older women grab on me. So, I mean, Prince was like an aphrodisiac. So there was a strong sexual connection to him from women, and he was very well aware of that. But to kind of address that in a concert made me feel like, all right, so I'm not such a freak. You know, here's somebody else that feels the same way. It didn't really have to be Prince. It could have been anybody. But as you said, because I looked up to him, was such a huge fan of his music, it made me feel like not so weird. Like, oh, okay, this is normal. He's kind of feeling the same thing, which made me want to explore it more.
Right. Like you said, it's like the point of why we're doing this. The point
I was
of the
gonna say
Lion's
that,
Den.
yeah.
You know, it's you know, Daniel became, you know, part of the pack. You became one with Prince. You know, it made sense. You know, that commonality where you can connect with people. That's what we're trying to do. Is make life make sense for people, so we all have a better experience while we're here.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. To like the experience you had with Prince in that specific scenario is kind of what we want to do here at the Lion's Den. In the Lion's Den, is share those experiences that people relate to make them don't feel ostracized, to make them feel like, man, somebody else is, you know, dealing with the same thing as me, and hopefully, you know, people do take that from this, and they benefit from it. You know, that'd
For
be
sure.
like a solid reward for me. And I don't ever have to find out about it. I think we all would just be pleased if somebody does take what we put out and benefit from it.
No doubt. I mean, that's definitely part of anybody's evolution, be it faith, spirituality. I mean, even within religion, is you have that natural progression, that natural growth. You know, for my experiences, especially within religion, you know, I don't know how honest. Nobody's saying what we just said. I've been to many of them. Right. Nobody's talking about that stuff. No. I assure you. And again, when you don't have that commonality, you feel ostracized. You feel like a freak. So then it makes you stop going, or makes you check something else out. And even in my case, as much as, you know, what was a little unique for me is I knew there was a God at a very young age. I mean, 6, 7 years old, I was asking for a Bible. So for me, it's not about faith. It's not about spirituality. It's not about religion. I know there's a God. So then it became, well, okay, how does that relate in my life? What does that really mean? How do I get to a higher connection, closer connection with that? And religion seems like a natural place to start. And it's been extremely healthy for me. But it was a long path following it, getting away from it, getting back involved in it. You know, I'm proud to be a Catholic. I mean, it's been definitely a rough 5-10 years for us. I mean, we haven't represented ourselves the best, but, you know, I'm very proud to consider myself that. But I also don't want someone to feel that if they're going to church, if they're going to temple, and they're not feeling good about it, or they're not feeling that connection, to feel like they have to turn any idea of God off.
I mean, that's kind of what happened to me.
For sure.
I'd gone to, there were times in my life when I did feel extremely lost and knew it was a higher power, knew religion was helpful in a lot of sense. I remember being at a point in my life and, I need to go to church. And going, I think I rode my bike, small town church, pulled up, parked, walked inside, and it was like, the scene from a movie, the record skips, everybody turns, you hear the pews creak, and I just humbly sat in the back and was like, it was the most unwelcome thing ever. Mm-hmm. And I actually described that to, a neighbor at the time, and it's like, hey man, you should come to my church. And that's really what started the turn for me. And had he not said something, I would have just shut off religion and been like, it's not where I belong. But I discovered another church and discovered another path and was able to get what I was searching through a different avenue. And it's been an amazing ride, and I still continue to go, kind of when I need it. I always say, God hears you better when you're in his house. And there's times when in life, you're like, I need to go to church today. And I go. And it's been great to have that. And I don't know what, much like if you didn't discover Prince, what would have happened? If he even have said that to me, I don't know where I would be with religion or faith or any of it.
For sure.
Well, I think what's great about that is you always get the answer you're looking for. It's just whether or not you're open to it. Mm-hmm. So one of the new things I've been challenging myself with is, when we talk about prayer, we talk about going through struggles, and you said it in episode 1, we talked about, it's funny how God is so much more present in our minds when things are going bad. When things are going good, we don't really focus in on that. So, one of the things I've been challenging myself with is when I'm in prayer, whether I'm in conversation, and this could be when I'm driving down the road, it could be when I'm kneeling down, whatever the case may be, I try to challenge myself to be open to what kind of vessel I'm getting an answer from. So, the great thing about faith, spirituality, religion is if you're open to it, you get the answer you're looking for. You went to church that day, and how I look at it, and it's obviously your experience, not mine, but how I look at it is you went to church and you walked in, and it sounds like you didn't feel very comfortable, and you felt like it was exactly what you thought it was going to be. Yep. You got the answer you needed. You came home, you had the courage to strike a conversation up with your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And usually neighbors, you're talking about what you're grilling, Yep. It's not talking about your faith, and you got the answer you were looking for. Come to my church. Yep. And for you, it was what you were talking about with Prince. I mean, if I wouldn't have saw that, I don't know if I would be in the religion. I don't know if I would have that faith. Well, how do you know that, there was a chance you weren't going to see that? Mm-hmm. We so often speak to that higher power, and we're very selfishly asking for things, or we're very direct in how we expect to get some sort of response back, And I think if you're open-minded to it and you really look and you're actually trying to find the blessing instead of trying to find the downside to it, it's right in front of your face. Mm-hmm. Prince was there to show you the example of what you were going through in that exact same thought. And for you, your neighbor stepped up and, come to my church, and you found a place where you felt like, hey, right now, this is my pride. This is where I belong.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something I'm challenging myself with, is to be open, to be receptive. If I'm praying for strength, am I looking for strength in a certain way, and I'm getting it in a different way, and I'm just not open to it? So I'm really challenging myself to kind of look at it that way, because I think the answers are always there. It's just, are you willing to accept it, or is it not what you wanted? So, well, that's not an answer because I didn't want that. I wanted it to come this way. Something I've just been kind of thinking about, challenging myself with.
That's very mature from a religious standpoint, or a spiritual standpoint, to be open to whatever answers come by you, whatever methods the answers are brought to you.
Yeah.
One of the things I try to do in that same aspect is I try to make sure that I interpret the answers the best way possible. Because one of the things that we do in all the different religions, I think religion started by interpreting the same messages differently.
Right.
You know, so God's putting the same messages out to everybody, tailored to you, but then you interpret it differently. So if
Very
you go
true.
here, two pastors, two priests speak about the same subject of the Bible, same chapters, whatever, same verses, they're going to preach it to you differently. And that's because they have different interpretations. So I always try to challenge myself to get to the baseline interpretation as best as what God meant it to be, and not what I understand. Because sometimes what we understand is not what it was meant to be, you know, because it depends on your level of understanding. Like,
Right.
as with anything, if somebody tries to talk to you about algebra and you haven't learned algebra yet, you know, they could be breaking it down as small as possible, simple as possible, but they're still speaking a foreign language to you.
Right.
So I try to do that for understanding.
I mean, a lot to the point that Daryl just made. I mean, that's really what's so important about the Lionz Den is getting together, having those different conversations, being able to understand that different people are coming from different directions. And, you know, again, when we're talking about religion, faith, spirituality, even for me, I mean, I had a great teacher, Steve. He's going to hate me for saying it, but he was, you know, he came from a Eastern philosophy background, and I'll never forget. I mean, it's the greatest book I've ever read. It's Khalil Gibran. It's called The Prophet. And Eddy, you got to check this book out. Prophet? Who's the prophet? Just check it. There's only one prophet. It's Jesus. No, it's not that kind of book. Well, no, I can't read that because the only prophet is Jesus. And this was like a month, never-ending thing where I just refused to read it. Like, I honestly felt like it was sacrilegious to read the book. And a lot of that is the teachings I've heard, stuff that, you know, I've been told. And the biggest thing I will say, and actually talked about it in the book, is that Christianity is probably one of the most misrepresented religions that's out there. A lot of stuff that we've heard, we've been told, isn't part of the faith, definitely isn't a part of Jesus' teachings. It's somebody heard something that somebody heard, reinterpreted it their way. A lot of times it's a means of control, but, you know, just from him staying on me about reading it and actually getting him to shut up, I read the book, and it was revolutionary for me. I mean, it was so unbelievably incredible. Blew my mind. Never had read anything like it in my life. I mean, to this day, it's one of my all-time favorite books. I've probably given 100 copies to people. And more than anything, it showed me to not be so dismissive to something outside of what I already know, to be open to other teachings. And ironically enough, Khalil Gibran was a huge Jesus fan. Huge Jesus man. I remember his love letters and stuff, constantly talking about God and Jesus. So here in my mind, I'm doing something sacrilegious, and it was the furthest thing from it.
You talked about, you know, really religion through the ages. It's stories told, and it's that old game of telephone. You know, when you're a kid,
For
you
sure.
start one at a table as it works its way around. It's a completely different story. It's really religion in a nutshell. And I think for me, that was why my take on it was, I need to find a path that makes sense to me, because some of this doesn't make sense. But also, I think one of the greatest things like you talked about is, you know, one pastor or preacher can preach the same sermon two different ways because it's your take on it. So it's how it makes you feel, what your interpretation of religion is, and the stories are really what make it great, you know. And even just like the Lionz Den, you know, here we are. It's that revelation. As you guys are talking, and then your drive home, you're kind of pondering. Daniel didn't survive. He became a lion. He became part of the pack. So I think it's one of the things that makes religion great. I think it's you can make it your own, make it your path.
To your point about telephone too, that's very accurate. I would say that it's the same, but you have to add an element to it. Because with religion, the way it was is that, say I told you a secret to your ear, you know, I had you tell Alex, and then had Alex tell Eddy, and then Eddy wrote it down, and then he wrote it and passed it to another person, and then they passed his written message to another person. But then that written message started getting told by word of mouth again, by word of mouth again, by word of mouth again. Every time you pass it from written to verbal to written to verbal to each person, it's going to start to alter itself to where it's unrecognizable. So that's why it's a journey when you start trying to find your path into spirituality and faith and religion, because you're trying to weed out all the things that's been added, all the additives to the story. Especially when you start adding in language. So you have time, language, and the person. I do speak another language, and I know when I translate stuff that majority of things do not translate directly. You know, so when I speak Filipino Tagalog, I learned it in school. I went to school for 6 months, and I would often ask my teacher, well, how do you say this? And I would give her a sentence, and she would say, well, you can't say that like that. The way you say it is this way, and she would say it, but I'm like, that's not a literal translation. But the point is, you know, is translated. And people forget that because everything's so literal. So when they started translating the Bible and translating these messages, they translated it into the languages that they did, and they used the words that language offered, which left certain things up to interpretation, and then people ran with that. So, you know, when we start to look at that, if you really break it down like that, you understand that everything you read has to be thought out and interpreted, because the way that we're reading it now is not the way that it was written or said.
And I would also say, even beyond the interpretation, beyond the words, beyond the languages, even if it's exactly how it was said, you know, the way different people take it is totally different.
Yes, you can say.
We've now been talking about Daniel in the Lion's Den many times, and again, coming away with a completely different interpretation than most people would. You know, I think the most important thing is it's not about being right or wrong. It's what speaks to you and the truth that you find in it. And to your point, a lot of people get lost in that. I mean, I've been to churches where there's arguments. Is Adam and Eve symbolic? Is it the truth? Is that historical? And all of that. You know, we have friends that, us being Roman Catholic, you know, it's our Virgin Mary. And, Jesus had brothers, and, and you know, we jazz and give each other a hard time about it all the time. Yeah. And I'm like, that's the Virgin Mary for me. You can't touch that. Right. You know, but it's never that serious. I mean, for me, for my faith, that's what I believe. That's what works for me. When I look at Mary, that's what it means to me. I don't begrudge anybody who views it a different way. There's, you know, you have every right to do that. I think where we really get lost, and what's so unfortunate, is because we're talking about God, who's the epitome of love, who's the epitome of understanding, who's the epitome of all that. And Jesus as his son carrying that to us, that we've fought wars over it, we get in arguments over it, marriages get breaking over it, friendships get broken over it. And you really got to ask yourself, if it's that serious, did you lose the message somewhere within that?
With religion, faith, spirituality, you know, let's use the example of Adam and Eve. Is it a symbol for something? Is it reality? You know, if that story doesn't do anything for you, you know, just move on from it. You know, I think the biggest thing to remember with faith and religion is, Daryl, if you take something out of that, and well, I don't, you know, that I'm not going to argue the point with you that it's irrelevant. You know, just for me, there's nothing I can grab out of that, which, you know, in this case I can, but using the example of if I couldn't, I would just move on. And I think as you get older and you mature, you start looking at things as, well, I turned this cup over and there was nothing in it. Screw this set of cups. I'm going on to the next one. You know, if somebody handed you a shovel and dropped you off on a beach and said, hey, dig a hole because there's $1 billion someplace on this beach, you're going to dig one hole and be like, this is a waste of my time, this beach is empty? Well, of course not. You're going to go to the next hole to see if there's something that you can get out of there. You're going to go to the next hole. You're going to keep digging. You're going to keep digging. And never really looked at it that way with religion and faith, where, that doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't hit home. So as I get older, as I become more mature, I start looking into that and trying to find something that does hit home. Just because I don't latch onto a piece here doesn't mean I'm not going to a little bit later down the road or something completely separate. And I think too many times we allow ourselves to write things off if it doesn't bear fruit right away.
Yeah.
And we don't challenge ourselves to look deeper and deeper into it.
Yeah. One of the things, too, picking up on the points that everybody's made, too, is that people receive information a certain way. So there's certain people who receive information, no matter what you say, they hear the negativity in it.
Right.
Then there's people who hear the positivity in everything. We actually know a guy named Tim. I think all four of us know Tim. You know Tim? Mm-hmm. He's positive about everything.
He's the most positive man.
brother.
Yeah, he's
Like,
the man.
ridiculously positive. I pride myself on being a realist. If I hear something positive, I'm like, that's great. If I hear something that has a negative aspect to it, I'm like, that's not so great, and I'll leave it at that. But, like, it's people like Tim who'll be like, well, it's not too bad because if you look at it this way, and I just frown and just say, I mean, yeah, but sure, okay. And I think with religion and with spirituality and faith, you have those people who, no matter what, they hear the story of Adam and Eve, they want to just debate it because what they hear is negative to them. It doesn't line up with what they understand. So they want to pick at it.
Yeah.
They don't want to try to understand it. They don't want to try to find what makes sense or find what's positive. And it doesn't have to be Adam and Eve. It can be any story or it can be any aspect of religion or faith or spirituality. But I think a good way to start your journey is to alter how you take in information, because if you're going in negative, you're going in at an uphill battle, with anything.
Yeah. And it's so much more hard. Yeah, it's so much harder to be positive than it is to be negative.
No doubt about it.
I mean, speaking of the guy you just talked about, when he first came into my life and, I started working for Tim, I struggled with it. I mean, you'd call me in the office and be like, dude, you're being a prick. It's one of the nicest dudes you're ever going to meet, and you're being a pain in the ass. And it wasn't because I didn't like the guy. Yeah, I have the most respect for him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he has no idea what my time with him did for me to help me grow as a person, because I was at a point in my life where, I mean, that's when we had the conversation of, hey, man, us being friends, you represent me. And you're a bad representation of me right now, and that was something I had to hear at that time in my life. And then I have a guy like Tim that comes in that, you could have the building burning down and be like, guys, it's okay. We have a sprinkler system. We could rebuild, you know? And for me, I struggled with that and I pushed back on that. And, what was great about him was he was exactly what I needed at that time of my life, because I wasn't allowed to live in the negative. It didn't matter how much I tried to bully, so it would be like, man, I'm not trying to talk to Alex about this stuff anymore, because he kind of takes it a little far. He didn't care. He was relentless on being positive. And he has no idea how much I needed that in my life at that time. That developed me. I ended up moving out of the comfort of a store I had been in 4 years onto a new venture. And going through that with somebody like that, it gave me a completely different outlook, And
using that as an example, I mean, at that time, and you're at the store now, you've been at the store, it was like a daily, what's going on? This is so bad. What are we doing wrong? What do we need to be doing better? Why is this not working out? And it's all from a very sincere, honest place. I mean, you're really genuinely trying to get better.
Right.
Whereas Tim looked at it as, okay, I'm going to entertain it for 3 minutes. What are we doing to change it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And putting that into faith in religion, when you're trying to find evolution, when you're trying to level up, that's really, I think, the most important question you need to be asking yourself is, how am I doing that? Am I going through that from a positive aspect of, hey, I want to evolve. I want to grow. I want to have a better connection with God. I want to have a better connection with people. Or are you going in it from an aspect of anger, frustration? Because the reality is you're going to find it. If you want to come in it from a negative place, if you want to come in it from a spiteful, hateful place, unfortunately, you're going to find that gathering, you're going to find that church, you're going to find that group. And especially for me, again, talking about God, talking about Jesus, who is nothing but love, is the epitome of love, to see, I can't think of who the idiots are, but, God hates gays. And you're like, okay, really? Are you sure about that? Does God really hate anybody? And is that really the best use of your time? Is that really the message you want to share? Even if you really believe something as ridiculously stupid, acidine, is that really how you want to represent yourself? Is anybody looking at that sign saying, hey, I want to be a part of that?
Right.
That's great. And if you are, you got to really question where you're trying to get to with your faith.
I mean, that's definitely a sign that you missed the message. So if you can write that out on a sign, if you can say it as one thing, if you can write it out on a sign, it's like writing, 1 + 1 is 4, and having conviction in doing it, and then just hold that sign up. 1 + 1 is 4 with a straight face, and you're like, but it's not. That doesn't make sense
At all.
And
At all.
That's how I feel when I see that and stuff, and that's definitely that negative person.
Yeah.
If you
No doubt
understand
about
God
it.
is love, then how can you write that and have the conviction behind it?
Right.
And exactly. One of the biggest things I've ever learned about faith, religion, spirituality is when you come to this earth, you're here to be happy. I wasn't put here to, for example, let me finish what I'm going to say. I wasn't put here on this earth because my job's to make sure that my wife is happy, right? Now, pause.
Yeah, you have to go home.
Pause.
You're not sleeping here.
Pause.
This will be published.
That's why
by the way.
I gave
You're not
an
sleeping at my
intro.
house.
So I'm put here to be happy. Now, I made a conscious decision to share my life with somebody that I wanted to grow a family with. Now, I wasn't put here on this earth to find necessarily somebody to make happy. I made that decision. And when I made that decision to do that. And that's my responsibility. That's what I want to do. I want to be in a healthy relationship. I want to be in a happy relationship. But my point is initially I was put here to find happiness for me, right? I was created to live a life of joy, to be a soldier of Christ, to be a positive person. And I think we forget that, It doesn't matter what that means. It doesn't matter who you fall in love with. If you're a man and you fall in love with a man, are you happy?
Amen.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
If you're, whatever the case may be, are you finding true happiness? Or is it a facade? If it's something that you're just putting on for people, that's not genuine. If it's something you're truly happy, God bless you. Whatever that is, just find what makes you happy at your core and run with it. Be proud of it.
For sure.
Well said. Yeah. I agree fully in that. And, what's weird is there's people, like you said, those people you're talking about, and the people you're talking about, it's the Westboro, whatever they are.
Oh.
But anyway.
Yeah.
If you're just inherently angry and just mad at the world, you can make anything vengeful and use it. Absolutely. Use it as that lever. Our job here, our goal here is to give people an outlet. And even if you are kind of have that, if you find in yourself down and out,
Or angry, come on in, brother.
Yes.
We're here. We get it.
Like, let's chat. The goal is communication. You talked about your wife, your family, you're growing. Like, the more you can talk to each other, the more we can all talk, the more we as people can all talk together and figure this out through faith, through religion, through spirituality. It's going to be a better place for everybody.
I mean, love definitely works. Love and positivity. I know a guy. I'm not gonna say his name. I know a guy who's kind of like that, and I make him give me hugs every day, and then I give him candy. And I know if he could beat me up, he would try, but he can't, and he can't, so I use that to my advantage. So I literally come in and I see him on a daily basis, and I make him physically hug me. And he's actually broken down. The other day I came in and he just opened his arms.
Love prevails.
Yeah. And in my head, I laughed out loud, but I'm like, see, it just took about a year. But
I don't know if you guys remember a couple years back with all this stuff, all this strife. There was a young man, I can't remember how old he was, but he was kind of going on both lines, both for the officers and Black Lives Matter and other people, and just hugging people. And he actually wore a shirt that said "Give hugs."
Yeah.
And I just, this is a guy that gets it. This is somebody that knows what it's about, knows what we're here, knows what is going to move things forward. I mean, we've all been there. We've all been violent. We've all been angry. Yeah. You get nowhere with it. It just doesn't work. I wish it did, because sometimes it's super easy.
It's the easy way.
It's no doubt. I mean, hitting somebody in the back of the head seems like, hey, problem solved, but it just doesn't work. It never does. And I think that when we're in that mindset, we so desperately want that to be the answer. And in doing that, you try to find that outlet. And sometimes that may bring you to something very like that vengeful God, that everybody hears about, or sometimes completely steers you away from God or steers you away from faith. And it's just so important to, again, always be asking yourself, what am I really trying to accomplish? Yeah. What am I going to get from this? Because when I see that, it's just such a waste of energy that's going to end up nowhere, because you're still going to be miserable. You're still going to feel alone. You're still going to feel like you don't belong, and you're not evolving. You're devolving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, you hit it on the head. Everybody has. It's the communication side of it, and you have to remember that your perception's your reality, and somebody else's is theirs. I mean, and using the example again, and I'll never forget the first time where I felt like, man, sometimes, and my wife and I really don't argue that much. She's a great mother, great wife. She puts up with me.
You're just backtracking
on a daily basis. But I remember the first time she said something and it hit home so hard for me of, well, I feel like this, and this, but sometimes I feel like I can't tell you that. And I got just this terrible knot in my stomach, right? Because one of the things I've always sucked at was communication, which is why I'm so long-winded. If you know me, you know that I don't shut up. And it's because that's my way of overcompensating that, is by now trying to over-communicate. And I remember when she said that to me, I was like, I felt disappointed in myself, but I had to quickly retract that, because somebody who loves me, who I love, just told me, hey, I feel like I can't communicate with you. That whatever that may be, I feel like it's going to shut you off. I feel like you're going to be upset. You're going to be angry. So if I get angry, I just proved her correct. Mm-hmm. And there's been times that I've dropped the ball. I've messed it up. I've gotten angry. I've gotten upset, and I've ruined that. But there's been times where you step back and you look at it and you're like, why do you feel like that? And I don't think we as people do that enough. One, not enough people are honest of, hey, well, I don't talk to you about this, and this, because I don't feel like I can. And on the flip side of the coin, we don't self-reflect on that and say, well, why, Daryl, why do you feel like that? Or in my situation with my wife, why do you feel like you can't say that? Mm-hmm. And the hard truths that follow, you really got to let them hit home. You got to listen to it. And with all the stuff you're talking about, imagine if we lived in a world where you've got people protesting and people being violent, if we could have a conversation about, well, why do you feel like that? Now, I know it's not reality where we're all going to be sitting in a circle singing Kumbaya, but if we just did it a little bit more, would that solve issues? I don't know, but I think it's
that's really
worth a
what
shot.
This is about. I mean, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was something you wanted to add, Daryl.
To that, I mean, if you act, I believe in that. I believe that if somebody tells you something, you should hit listen and then always ask why. But what comes behind that why is usually something you don't want to hear. And I think the hardest part of having conversations or communicating, once you start adding people to the conversation, is that people don't like hearing the negative, the things that might make them not feel good. So, I mean, I was married for 12 years, and if my wife told me something, I would ask her why. And I knew, like, oh, well, why do you feel that way? It's usually going to come from something that I probably don't want to hear. But that comes with another part where you discuss that too. Take it in. Like, oh, man, I didn't know you felt that way. And if it is something that I can do to adjust that, then I'll adjust it and I'll acknowledge it. But it comes with accountability. And the larger the group, the less likely for accountability to be done on its own accord, you know. So I think that is 100% right what you said, but it's harder to do when you start adding more people. It's hard to do for individuals too.
Yeah,
For sure. Brett?
I think that about covers everything. I mean, you know.
it's what you said earlier, 20 minutes ago, man. I'm way too comfortable being uncomfortable.
I am too. Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
But you gotta be. I
You do.
mean,
Yeah,
way too comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
yeah. It's a lifestyle.
So again, just want to thank everybody for their time. Please feel free to comment. And again, keep it positive. I could already see the comments about some of the stuff that we talked about. Don't waste our time or yours. There's plenty of places to take that nonsense. Keep it constructive. Keep it positive. You could also write us Lionz Den. It's with a Z, Lionz, Lionz Den at gmail.com. We also have our Instagram, our Facebook, which is Lionz Den 146. And we also have a podcast. So if you don't have the time to kind of just sit down and watch this, feel free to check out our podcast. It's on all the major different networks where you could find them. And I thank everybody for their time.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you
very
guys.
much.